So I want to thank the organizers, for putting this together and inviting me here. I know we lost some time, so this was a 1 hour session. Now will be, um, cut down to 40 minutes. So I'm just going to go right into the topic. These are some of the tips the organizers put in case if you have issues, you can take a look. I'm not going to read my bio, but take a note of my contact. So later on, because we have to shorten the session, if you have any follow up, any questions, comments after this event, please do reach out to me. I already uploaded my material into the GitHub. You can download, test it. If you run into any issues, please let me know. So why should you listen to this talk, right? Why would you spend, it's your Sunday, right, in Pakistan. Why do you take an hour off and listen to me? So this talk is about business continuity if with Azure SQL Database. So if you're in Azure, hopefully some of you are already using Azure, so you are curious how to have your high availability and disaster recovery solution, or some of you are probably not into Azure right now, but you are on premises and you are thinking about it, right? So it doesn't matter where you are, but if you have anything to do with Azure SQL, this is the talk that you want to listen to. So as you can see in this slide, this is a true story. January 2019, in Azure regions. So in UK South, there was an outage for 16 hours, 11 minutes. So the question you have to ask yourself, if you have a mission critical business and you're running with Azure SQL, and if it's down, can you afford to be down for 16 hours, 11 minutes, right? If the answer is okay, then it's fine. There are some businesses they can sustain, this kind of outage and they can go into paper trail and later on they can recover. But there are businesses they cannot. So it all depends on your business. I'll show you a bunch of solutions and you have to pick up based on your business. Do not think that, database professionals like DBAs and data engineers, this is not our job to set up RPO, RTO, and I'll talk about what is RPO, RTO. This is up to the business owners. Your job is to give them options, talk to them, agree on what should be your timing, how long you can be down, and then work with them to implement a solution. Because if they say that I can only be down for 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes, it's going to cost them more money. Are they willing to dish out the money? If they say no, I can be out for 24 hours, you can take the backup and restore from there, fine, then you can be cheaper, but make sure you have this in writing beforehand, not after your systems go down. And there are a couple of other examples I took, and this is straight from this website that you see on the top. Even just look at a certain, just some recent dates: 16th February, 15th February, 12th February, and look at the outage times, right? How long these outage were. These were like about 8 hours. This one was longer than that. This one started on the 12th February, went up to 15th February. So span of 3 days there was some outage. So it doesn't, going to Azure doesn't solve your problem. These are still machines, these are still computers and running, virtual machines on top with software. This is still has network cooling power and all that. So you will have outage. But, as database professionals, we should be ready for that. And we should, like I said, discuss with our business owners and make sure we put solutions beforehand, not after things go south. So there are two terms if you do not know. These are RTO and RPO, and you should be absolutely familiar with this. Make sure you talk to your business owners, make sure you have agreed RPO, RTO. So in a lay term language, right, what's RTO? RTO is a recovery time objective. It's the amount of time that a business can be without the service, right? And you should be able to recover within that time. And RPO is the maximum targeted period that you can lose data, right? So it's a recovery point objective, means. And for some business, this can be, zero, that I cannot lose any data. For some business, yes, I can lose a little bit and then I can recover. So based on that, that will dictate what kind of solution you want to implement for your SQL servers that are running in Azure. And Azure has different flavor of SQL servers. That's why, it's a generic term. It can be PaaS, Azure SQL Database. It can be SQL Managed Instance, Hyperscale. And I'll show you some of the options that we have in Azure. Now, there's a new term there. So recently, in last few years, we've been seeing this is called ERT. And ERT stands for estimated recovery time. So what does that exactly mean? It means that your maximum of your ERT should be your RTO, because you have multiple components, right? It's not just your Azure SQL database, your web servers, your app, whatever. The whole system has to be up for the business to run, right? Just recovering SQL Server doesn't help if your app servers are still down, right? If your network is still down in Azure. So look at all the components and you find out what's the maximum, like which component you need most of the time or the maximum time, and that should be your official or your agreed RTO. And please, I'm not following the chat. I'm sure the organizers have a way to see the questions. So if you have any question, please put in the chat, and the moderator will stop me, and I should be able to answer the question, because I just don't want to go too quick. If you have questions, I'd rather stop and then answer the questions for you.
I think that's fine. Yeah, I think you can carry on with your session. Yeah, I'll keep you posted with the questions.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks a lot. So this is another visual, what I just said, RTO and RPO. Now there is a little discrepancy here, and some people might agree with it, some people might not agree, and both are correct. Even if you don't agree, that's correct. And what do you mean by that? Sometime what will happen, a disaster will happen. And when I say disaster, it includes everything, right? Say you had a deployment at 5 p.m. and by mistake you truncated a table or you deleted some data that you didn't intend to, or probably you didn't have a where clause, your predicate was not correct, so you lost some data. And nobody found it, right? Maybe the next day the business started and they found out that, hey, this data doesn't look right, and you got notified. So you see this from the time your disaster happened and the request for recovery, right? So this time you lost, right? Because nobody knew, nobody reported about it. Now, should this be included into your RTO? Some people might say no, the RTO should start when the request for recovery, and some people say no, it's from the point of time that we lost the data. So both are right. I'm not going to go into argument, but just so you know, this gives you a visual, is so you can clearly understand a little bit better that what I'm talking about. Now again, as I said, should this be part of RTO? This can be a matter of debate. So hopefully we have some clear idea that what's RPO, what's RTO, what is ERT. And again, I'll give you a checklist at the end that these are the things that you should go and discuss with your business owners. Do not wait till your data center goes down. Do not wait till a region, like I'm in the east coast of US. Do not wait till the whole east US goes down. Then you go and talk to them, hey, how long we can be down and all that. No, this should be agreed beforehand. Whenever you are moving to cloud, you are deploying a new app, these things should come in the forefront into the discussion, and you should make it clear. Now, I talked about Azure SQL Database. Azure SQL Database has a bunch of flavors. So let's focus on the PaaS and leave the hyperscale. I'm probably not going to talk much about it. I'm not going to talk much about managed instance, primarily Azure SQL Database. And so Azure SQL Database you can deploy into two different models. One is a DTU model and one is a vCore model. And initially Microsoft came with DTU, which is called Database Transaction Unit, and then later on they came out with the vCore. And Microsoft's current recommendation is if you're deploying a brand new Azure SQL database, go with the vCore. Does that mean that if you have DTU, you should switch to vCore? Probably no. If it's working for you, don't worry about it. And then underneath it has, purchase model. Underneath it has service tier like basic, standard, premium. I'm not going to read all this. Under the service tier, there's a compute tier. So you can have provision. So you have your fixed number of CPU and memory, or you can have serverless. So serverless might work better for you if you're working, like intermittent workload, right? You do not have the same workload round the clock, or sometimes you do not have anything. That way you are not, you are not paying for it for the whole day. You can go to serverless, but there are some restrictions with serverless. And then it comes to the hardware type. And again, you should know all this because some of the solutions I'm going to show you that is available only on certain hardware. Like, like I think there was one called, I think within a data center, you can have, 3 different buckets. And I'll show you more details. I think it only works on Gen 5. So you should know this before, right? Do not deploy something and then find out that, okay, I want to have this kind of HADR solution, but that's not available in this tier or in this hardware type, right? Then you have to, do the work again. So I mentioned about DTU and vCore model. So just to touch on it, on the left, as you see the DTU model, so this is kind of a abstract model, right? So your compute, storage, and IO is abstract, and it just published as a DTU. So you really don't know how much CPU, how much memory you are getting, how many IOPS you are guaranteed. You only know this is a DTU, the database transaction unit, and underneath, based on that number, Microsoft gives you certain number of CPU memory and guarantee some kind of apps. When you go to vCore model, now you can clearly see how many vCPU you have, and then how much memory you get per CPU, and there is also a guarantee of the IOPS. So that's kind of the basic difference. Now, this talk is about redundancy. So what kind of redundancy you're talking about, right? If you look at this from left to right, you should think about all of this, right? Do you have redundancy within the data center? Because Microsoft, when you go to Azure, Azure has region, and within the region you can have zone, and in a zone you can have multiple data center. So if a whole region goes down, what do, right? There's some built-in HADR solution, but they do not expand beyond a region. They're within a region. And once you go through those, it will make sense. So think about all this, right? Do I have redundancy geographically, right? If I'm doing business in multiple continents, how do I, design this? Now, you might be able also sometimes restricted by certain regulations. Say like if you have a business that's supporting UK government's entity, they have very strict rules that the data cannot live outside. So if a country itself doesn't have two regions, how do you solve that problem? You should think about it, right? Because if you look at the map, not every country have multiple regions. Like in US, yes, we have Central, we have West, we have East, and within East we have East US 2. But many countries doesn't have those, that many. So, and if you cannot take your data outside the country and outside the geographical boundary of that country, how do you design that? So think about all those. Now, these are some of the solutions I'm going to talk about. Some of you might be questioning looking at this slide, like why temporal table is here, right? Temporal table is, I know that it's not a HADR solution, but temporal tables enable you to restore row versions from any point in time, right? But there's also some limitations, how long you keep your history data. Also based on tier, there are certain restrictions. So look at that. I'm not going to talk about temporal table, because there's really no difference between on-premises and in Azure. Pretty much the same technology. So you can look it up by yourself, but we'll talk about the other 5. So the first one, I'm going to talk about automated backup. And before I go there, I want to show you this slide and why do I want to talk about this. So if someone say, I do not want to put any extra money, I just want to deploy Azure SQL Database, and that's all I can do, right? So what kind of RTO RP you get? So you get RPO of 1 hour, means you can lose data for 1 hour. And if you have to restore, it might need up to 12 hours. And these are numbers from the URL at the bottom of the slide you see from Microsoft documentation. So I did not come up with these numbers. So you want to go to your business owners and say, hey, if you do not want to set up failover groups or active geo replication, can you sustain your business if you're down for 12 hours? If the business owners say fine, that's good. We don't have to do anything else. If they say no, okay, then I can give you auto failover groups. Are you good with 1 hour? No. Okay, then I can get you down to 30 seconds, but then we need to set up active geo replication, means we need a second set of server in a different region. The cost is going to double. So these are some of the discussions that you're going to have with numbers. Now, so let's talk about automated backup. In Azure SQL Database, as soon as you deploy, Microsoft will take care of your backup. You do not have to do anything, but there's a caveat. You lose control of precise RPO and the frequency of backup based on your performance level and the database activity. And why do I say that? On premises, when we have a SQL Server database, we can go to SQL Server agent and I can say take exactly every 5 minutes, take my transaction log backup, right? Or every 6 minutes, 7 minutes. I do not have that control. This is a code from Microsoft documentation. It clearly says that cannot change the schedule of backup, and it depends on your workload, right? And again, these are from Microsoft website. If you see that your full backup is weekly, but it doesn't tell you that it's on Sunday at 2 p.m. every Sunday. No, your differential can be every 12 to 24 hours. So you really do not know exactly what time. Transaction log again between 5 to 10 minutes. So you really do not have a precise control of these timings, right? So just keep that in mind. And you can do point in time restore from those backups. If you are in basic tier, you get up to 7 days point in time. For other tiers, you can slide it up to from 7 to 35 days. Of course, there is a calculation how much backup you get for free, and after that you have to pay for storage. But I'm not going to get there because it can take a lot of time to go through those calculations, and that's not the goal. My goal is to show you all the bells and whistles that you have, so you can decide for yourself with your business owners that what kind of solution you want to deploy. There's also long-term backup, right? Like 35 days is not enough. Like I work for a financial investment management firm. If we just keep 35 days of data, that will not be enough even for the Federal Trade Commission if they come and come for audits. And if you work in healthcare, I'm sure I did before. Some of you probably need the data to keep for 7 years. So Microsoft has a solution called long-term backup. You can keep it up to for 10 years. Those backups automatically get copied to a different region. So if your region goes down, you can grab your backup from a different region and you can restore it, but it takes at least 12 hours. So you can set up long-term backup for weekly, monthly, and yearly. What's a yearly full backup? There is no yearly, right? But yearly is you select a week, and so that's my yearly backup. So if you look at the top row, what it's saying that my third week of the year, keep that backup for 5 years. So every year, the third week's backup, keep it for 5 years. That's how you determine a yearly backup. What you can do with those backups, you can restore point in time, like I said. If your region goes down, you can restore in a different region. You can also restore from your long-term backup. One thing you want to be careful. If you drop a database, you can restore from your backup. If you delete your server, if you delete your Azure SQL Server, you cannot restore from the backup, from the point in time backups. So just keep that in mind. Microsoft does this on the backup. If you read the Microsoft documentation, they do test restore, they do DBCC check DB, they do all the backups are with checksum. This does not, as of today, the restore test does not happen in managed instance. So as soon as they restore, they also run a DBCC check DB. But if you have a managed instance, it doesn't happen. So you should test by yourself, just so you know. As of today, it can change. I get this question very often. Can I restore these backups to on premises? No, you cannot. You cannot do that directly. But from your Azure SQL database, you see all these tools that I listed here. I'm not going to go through any of this. You can use some of these or in a combination of this to make a copy of the database. It's not an exact copy. It's pretty much extracting your schema and extracting your data and then put it together into on premises if you ever need to. You cannot directly take those backups and restore. It doesn't work. Built-in HADR. And HADR is a high availability and disaster recovery. So if you are into these tiers, as you see in this slide, what do you get? You automatically get a extra node, right? With the spare capacity. You have one copy of data and log file, but you have multiple computes you get. And your backup files automatically get copied, as I said before. So if your primary or where you are connected right now, in case if it fails over, what happened is based on the capacity, you automatically get moved to a different compute node. But as you can see from here, your data and log file only has one copy. which is also locally redundant. So these data and logs has to be detached from the current one and has to be reattached. So it's pretty much failover cluster instance. And because of this detach and attach, it takes a little bit more time compared to your premium and business critical. And you do not have to do anything. Microsoft will take care of it. As you can see, you do not have to change your connection string, but you will see a disconnect and then you will get reconnected as soon as your data and log file get reattached to the new compute. Your TempDB is attached. You also have SSD cache there. So those are attached to the compute. Those are not shared. Compared to that, if you are in business premium and business critical, now you see your data and log file, you have 4 copies, right? So you are not, there's no detach and attach. And one of the secondaries is always up to the marker. So it's always getting sync, not asynchronous. The other 2 get asynchronous replication. And you can also use one of these for read-only traffic. So if you put in your connection string for application intent equals read-only, you can take advantage of one of the secondaries for your read traffic. This is pretty fast. I have a demo if we have time. We should be able to look at it.
I think so you can stretch your session for a couple of like 10 to 15 minutes, I think. So you'll be able to sort of show your demo in more detail.
Okay, so, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll slow down a little bit because I was going at a full speed. Okay, so I can take some.
I think you'll have more time for the demo. So I think that the demo audience would be interested in sort of knowing what's the application sort of look like. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so I'll try to go through this quickly and then spend a little bit more time on the demo. Okay, that's nice. Thank you. Okay, so again, the backup is 1 copy, get copied, and here again, you do not have to do anything. Connectivity redirection is built in, and you can also rediscal, send your read traffic to the secondaries if you configure your connection string correctly. So all of these you get automatic. If you are into premium and business critical, you are not doing anything. You automatically get 4 copies, and there is some redundancy built in, as you can see from this picture. Now, so far what we have talked about, we are guaranteed within a data center, right? If a data center goes, within a data center, if my compute goes down, I'm guaranteed to be moved to a different compute and to a different storage. Now, in a Azure region, so like East US 2 or East US or West US, it's not just one data center. Microsoft has multiple data centers. So what you can do, you can go for zone redundancy. So what does this mean? Each region is divided into multiple zone, and each zone has its own power, own cooling, and own networking. So if one zone is unavailable, and if you turn on this zone redundancy, you will be automatically moved to a second zone. So how does that look like? In general purpose, which is still in public preview, just so you know, it will look like this. So you have 3 zones. We are still within a region. We are not going beyond a region. And you have, same VM capacity, 1 data and log file, but your TempDB is attached to your compute. So if you're, say I'm in AZ1, it goes down, and the server fabric, it recognizes that the service fabric recognizes that there is some issues. It will automatically move you to a AZ2 or AZ3, depending on where they have extra capacity. It will detach the data and log file and attach it to the new compute, and then you are good to go. And the traffic manager, what it will do, as you can see in the picture, the application is actually not pointing to your databases at all. The application is pointing to your Azure Traffic Manager, and the Azure Traffic Manager knows where is the primary, and it will automatically redirect you there. Now, in general purpose, this is disabled by default, and if you turn it on, it will cost you extra money. So make sure you check that out. The other thing you want to also be aware that as soon as you turn it on, now it will switch from asynchronous to synchronous replication. And make sure you test that for your application, because now your acknowledgements is going to take a little bit longer, because it has to make sure that that the log block is hardened on the secondary, right, before it gives you the acknowledgement back. As I was telling in the beginning, that why you want to know all the tiers and all the offerings that are available. As you can see in this slide, if you want to turn on your zone redundancy in general purpose, it's only available in Gen 5 compute. So if you deploy your Azure SQL with a different hardware, and then you want to turn this on, it's not available for you. So that's why you need to know all the offerings that are available and then match with what you want to do. Now in premium and business critical tier, it's again same what I showed you before. Your data and log file actually do get copied, right, continuously to 4 copies. But again, if you turn this on, then you are going to synchronous replication. So as I put it in the yellow, make sure your increase network latency and will increase your commit time. So make sure your application expected response is is in line with what you are looking for. And you are not paying any extra money if you're on premium business critical tier. In general purpose, you do pay extra money. Here is free for you, but again, it's disabled by default. You have to turn it on, only available in Gen 5 compute. Again, I put another slide about SLAs, right? I put one before. This is another reminder that you want to talk to your app owners and discuss with them. If they want zone redundancy, if they're in general purpose, they have to pay extra money. Why should they do it? Because they get a better SLA. Do they need it? I don't know, right? And if you go to this URL that I put here, it has a bunch of other SLAs, so make sure you want to discuss those with the business owner. So far what we have talked about is a redundancy within the data center that you get automatic, and then we said you get redundancy within the zone, which is within a region. Now what happens if the whole region goes down, right? I might not do anything else. I might not set this up what I'm going to show you, because what can I do? If I have networking set up in a different region, I can spin up Azure SQL Server, which only takes minutes, and then I can restore from those backups that it was taking. Because if you remember, I always keep talking about the backups are geo-redundant, means they get copied to a different region. But now that backup to restore can take up to 12 hours. Now, if that is acceptable, that's good. If your business owner said, no, I cannot wait for 12 hours, then you set up active geo-replication. So if some of you are familiar with always on availability group on premises, which I think came out in SQL Server 2012, and it's based, it's pretty much similar, and it's actually on the same code base. So this should be no news to you if you're used to always on availability group. And as I said on the first bullet point, leverages the always on availability group technology. This is a synchronous replication, up to 4 secondaries in the same or different region. And again, you can use the secondary for read-only traffic. Now, because it's asynchronous, one thing is important is what I said at the last bullet point, guaranteed to never have partial transaction, because it's using a snapshot isolation. And again, if it fails over, as you can see, your traffic manager will know, where to point you to. Now, you might have a transaction that you cannot afford to lose. You want to make sure that it get copied to the secondaries, right? And I'm not going to talk in details, but if you look at this SP word for database copy sync, you can include this within your transaction. This will guarantee that your transaction get copied to the secondary. But again, your commit time is going to increase, right? So use it wisely. You cannot, start using it everywhere probably. Now, active geo-replication is still at a database level. So if you are using always on availability group on premises, you probably know, you are aware that in availability group, I can have multiple databases, right? And when we fail over a availability group, transactionally, these databases are consistent, right? So all these databases fail over at the same time. So initially in Azure SQL Database, we did not have that capability because active geo-replication is at a database level, not at a server level, not at a multiple database level. So later on, Microsoft came up with this active failover groups, whereas you can see now I can have multiple databases, whereas in my previous slide, I only had a single database, right? Now I can have a group of database and I can fail those over. Also, the other good point is with the failover groups, you get a listener endpoint. You get a listener for read write, you get a listener for read only. And if you use these listeners in your connection string, when you fail over or fail back, you do not have to change anything because Traffic Manager will automatically use the listener and redirect you to the correct place. And I'll show you that in the demo. This is how the listeners look like. So, and this is documented, and I'll show you if you connected with listener, what do you see? Now, when you set up this failover groups, there is a setting called grace period with data loss hours. And you can set that the minimum is an hour. And this is a confusing setting in my view, because I struggled with exactly what does this mean, right? So I had bunch of email and correspondence with the product managers to understand this better. So if you are in summary, right, this is a link. You can go and read more detail about this. But in summary, what my understanding is, and this is also, the project managers or the product managers at Microsoft, they agree that if you have a shop that's 24/7 attended, like you have an operations center, this setting is not for you. If you have a shop that's, a small shop, 9 to 5, nobody's watching at night, you don't have like a central call center where all the alerts are going, then you probably should take advantage of this. So I'm not going to go any further, but if you are using failover groups, make sure you understand what this setting does and what you are setting it to. There is some comparison between geo-replication and auto failover groups. I'm not going to read this slide. This is mostly for your reference. So make sure you know what you are getting into, right? And choose wisely. I just put this. This is from Microsoft documentation because people always ask, how do I know what's my replication status, right? And of course, you have to understand what those columns mean. So just a simple selected statement from this will give you some idea of where you are with your status with your replication. So, this is not a comprehensive list, right? But these are some of the points. And you might already have a list, right? And your list probably have more stuff than I listed here, but these are some of the major ones or the most common ones that I can think of that you want to go and talk to your app owners. If you do not have a agreed RPO, RTO and ERT, please, when you go back to work on Monday, make sure you start this discussion. And if it's a new app, of course, you should discuss. So this can give you some, idea about, what are the things you're going to talk about. And that's all I have. So I'm going to go back to demo. And if you can give me like a 2 or, like a few minutes before I have to finish, then let me know so I can wrap up timely. I do not want to take time from the next speaker. So I know we started late, but I also want to be respectful.
So you can run this session to right about 10:45.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, around 10:45. Yeah, so then we can probably set up the next speakers as well in the queue. So
sure,
yeah,
sure. I appreciate that. So is there any question at this point before I go to the demo? Probably a good time to answer any questions, comments.
I think there is no questions.
Okay, so I'll move on. So before all of you came online, this is in the portal, Azure portal. So I created a resource group. A resource group is a container, really just a shell. And within that resource group, I created 3 Azure SQL Server. Azure SQL Server is also very different than on-premises SQL servers. So, I'm not going to go into details, but some of you are probably familiar. If you're not, please look it up. And then I created 2 databases in 2 of these servers, and I set all this up to save some time because setting this up takes some time, and I didn't want to take, because we have limited time, right? And you should be able to, and I'm using Azure Data Studio. This is a very lightweight tool. It's multi-platform. You can run it in Windows, Linux, and this is also extension based. And I'm using a notebook. A notebook is something that you can put your comments, you can put URLs, you can put your code, you can run your code, save it with the results. So I'm using a PowerShell notebook. If you're not familiar with notebook, I highly urge you to take a look. It's very powerful, especially for troubleshooting across the team, for demo purpose like I'm using it right now. So I already ran the code up to this point that it says, yeah. mm, Up to this point, and I'm not going to run this again, but I put enough comment for any of you. If any of you want to follow this, you should be able to, follow along and run this. Sorry. So the demo starts here. Yeah, I ran everything on top. So we talked about automatic backup, right? So now if we go to the portal and if we go to the server and go to backups, we have a database here, right? And if we look at the retention policies, as I said, on this database, as you see, we have 7 days point in time, right? But we do not have any long-term retention, like LTR is 0. So you have to set this up. Also, if we want to, we can do it from here, but I'll do it from PowerShell. As I said, I can slide it up to 35 days. If you're in basic tier, you cannot do that, right? So let's cancel this. And let's go back here. Now, if you want to check your retention policy, this is, and these are all come from AZ module, look it up, all this command. So I do not have anything, right? It's all 0, 0, 0, as you saw in the portal. Now I'm going to set up some long-term retention. So let's set this up from here. And once this is done, if you go to the portal, we will see that we should have some long-term retention, right? As you see now, we have 12 weeks and we have also 5-year retention for yearly backup. What does that mean? Means the 16th week of every year, keep that for 5 years. Right? And please put questions or stop me if I'm going too quick, if you're not following me, please. So it takes some time to get get it back to my laptop, but it's already set, right? And once it's set, you can use this command to look at the new retention policy. As we saw before, we didn't have any long term, but now we see those numbers, right? We have 5-year retention, week is 16, monthly 0, weekly is 12 week. If you want to remove the retention, you can use this command. So I'm not going to wait for this. Let's move on. Now, I said there's some built-in HADR, right? So what I did here, when I deployed this, I did not do anything. I did not set up anything else. I just deployed in the primary server. I deployed one database and I have a read scale out server. I deployed another database. That's all I did. Even my secondary is totally empty. There is no database, right? So I did not set up anything. I just wanted to make it clear to you. But I told you that there is built-in HADR, right? So, and I'll show you that. So I'm going to use a tool called OSTress. I put a link here. If you're not familiar with OSTress, this is a tool that we often use for stress testing, for workload testing, for if you are deploying a newer version of your software, you can run it pre and post and do some comparison and all that. So I put code here. You can run it into general purpose. This will take a little bit longer. And if you run the same test in a business critical, it's going to take less time because here we do not have to attach our data and log file, if you remember. So let's look at this in action. So let's copy this. So what I'm doing here, I'm connecting to this read scale out server. to my database, and I'm just doing a select count from one of the table, right? That's it, nothing else. As you can see, my application is running, is doing the count, right? All good. Now, let's initiate a failover. And Microsoft actually gave this command for us to test. So there is a limitation how frequently you can run this. This was not there before. Before you couldn't test this. Now you can. So we're going to do a failover, right? And this is a built-in. I haven't set up any extra server or anything or any extra database. Now see what happened. We're getting error now, and it got connected again. See how quick? So for a split second, we got disconnected, and then we got connected again. And once I get this back, I think you will see a time. So it's a 17 second. It actually happened a lot quicker. But for me, I'm in Boston, to go to the East US means, somewhere in Virginia or in North Carolina, and then get the acknowledgement back. Totally took 17 seconds, but the failover probably happened in less than 5 seconds. So any question here? And if I'm going too fast, please let me know. Okay, if not, I'll move on. So far we haven't set up anything, right? This is built in. And then we talked about active geo replication. So right now, what I'm going to do, in primary, I have this database. I'm going to set up a replica to that secondary server. Right now, you see this is empty, right? So let's run this command. It's going to take a little bit of time. And if you go to the portal, you should start seeing some stuff. So what it's going to do, first you take the database, and then we give the secondary server name. And we also say allow connections to all, means we can use that as a read-only traffic. Hopefully I didn't miss a step in the setup. Or we should be able to do it from here.
These are the wonders of live demo. You might end up doing something.
Yeah, no, I had a panic situation. I had, oh no,
No
it's working. I had to switch to a different computer just like an hour ago. I set up everything because it's Saturday. I was home.
Exactly.
Yeah, so now it says it caught up. So it's all done here.
All right, cool. Yeah, no worries. Take your time.
But I'm surprised that it is not showing here. You see, even I can see this here in the secondary. Before we didn't see a database, now we can see a data, it got created here. So that's very interesting that. Oh, okay. I don't know why, what happened. So now you can see this is the primary, this is secondary, and it's readable, right? So now we have active geo replication in East US and in West US. So if East US goes down, it will automatically move me to the West US, right? And we can see that. We can do a planned failover if we want to. And with this, we should see that our primary and second. I know the names are hard coded, but you should see that the roles will be flipped. As you can see now, my primary is in West US and my secondary is in East US, right? Please stop me if you think I'm going too quick or if it's not making sense. So I'm going to fail back again for the next demo. So we talked about active geo replication, then we also talked about auto failover groups, right? Because here I do not have any listener and I can only do a database by database. But if I have a bunch of database that's supporting one application and I want to fail those over together, in that case, I'm going to use the active geo replication. Sorry, I'm going to use the auto failover groups. So you should see that we are back into our old roles. Yep, we are back here. So let's talk about failover groups. Now here I'm going to just create a failover group. So just remember, there's a difference. When you set up active geo replication, I need to go to the database pane and go to the replicas. But when I'm talking about failover groups, that's from a server level, because here I can have multiple databases, right? As you can see here. So if I go to failover groups, I refresh, I do not have any failover groups. So let's create one. And this is just a shell. This is an empty failover group. It doesn't have any database at this point. Once you create the failover group, then you can add your database. And as I said, if you remember, this is the setting that I was talking about. Please read about it and make sure you know what does this mean, because this can have some implications if you do not have a like operations center, they monitor and attend stuff 24/7. So now if we come here, we see that we have a failover group. Grace period 120 minutes means 2 hours, but I do not have any database yet, right? I have 0 and I have 1 qualified because I just set up 1 database. So next, what do? We do add a database into this failover group. Now, if we come here, we should see that we have 1 database. If we click this, as you can see now, from East US to West US, it's replicating the data, right? It's seeding the data. And if you remember, I talked about this listener endpoints, right? So if you take these listener endpoints, and you can use Azure Data Studio, you can use Management Studio, doesn't matter. You can connect to those directly. So there's no server name here, right? It has the failover group name. So this is the irony of switching to a new computer. Okay, good. No. Oh, it cannot because I have to first add it to the server. So let me see if I can do this from the. I might be able to do it from here. It might not be. If I cannot, I'm not going to worry about that. Add my client IP. Yeah, because I switched to my work computer. Normally I do not, so this is going to cause a issue anyway. So I'm just going to cancel this. I have to first add it with the real server name. But if we come here now, so you can use this into your connection string, just so you know. Let me close this and go back there. And then here you can fail over, you can remove a database. Once you fail over, you do not have to do anything else. As long as these are in your connection string, this is for read-only traffic, this is for read-write, you should automatically get diverted or to routed to the right server. That's the beauty of this. Okay, so if you want to do a failover using PowerShell, you can do that. This is another command that I put in case if you want to get a details of your failover group to see how many server, what are your primary server, secondary server, what are the databases, all the details are here. Now, I talked about that by default, you do get read scale out, right? So even if you do not anything. So if you remember, I created a server named read scale out server, and this is a database, right? And I haven't, if you go to this database, I haven't created any replica for this database. Also, if you go to this server and go to failover group, I haven't created anything, right? So let's go back to this server and I'm going to show you something. So I'm connected to this server, right? And if I go to that database and now run this, it says that I'm in read write, right? This database is you can read or you can write. Now, if you take this connection and add this into your connection string, and I need to put the database name. If I connect now and take this, see it's read only. And we did not set up 2 servers, right? Just one. But because it's in a, so look at the tier, it's not in general purpose, right? What tier is this? We go to compute and storage. This is in a business critical. Means I automatically get 3 other nodes, and one of those node, as long as I put in my connection string that I want to, my application intent is read only, I'll automatically be able to use the one of the secondaries as replica. So you get this automatic, make sure you take advantage of it. I know that's not a HADR solution, but I'm just letting you know that it's there, right, for you to use it. So that's all I have. I'm going to clean up later on. So before I wrap up, just a few more things. These are all these resources that you can read about if you want to read more. If you want to download my slide and the code, you can take this barcode. I'll also send the link to the organizers later on. I'm sure they'll share it. I think in session eyes, I can also put it there, my GitHub link. Please download, play with it. And I'm going to show you my contacts again. So please, I know this was a rush. There was some, late start. And that's why I started very quick. But if you have any questions, comments, feedback, you didn't like it, you didn't understand, please reach out to me. And I guarantee you, you will hear back from me in 2-3 days. That's guaranteed. You can use any of this. I will definitely respond to you. So again, I want to thank you. I want to thank the organizers. There are some other great sessions I'm not going to be able to watch. It's almost 2 a.m. in my time. I'll go to bed, but hopefully you folks really enjoy. And please thank the organizers, right, and volunteers. These things are not easy. They've been working day and night for last few days to put this together for you folks, at free of cost. So thank you again. If any questions, I'll take it. We have 2 minutes, so if not, enjoy the conference.